He had been living in his in-laws' house for 3 months. On the morning of May 1st, he told his wife he was too sick to go to work. She left. By 2:30 in the afternoon, he was walking through the house with a knife. In a neighborhood called Qayadabad in Karachi's Malir area, a family had spent years doing more than their fair share for the people they loved. The head of the household was a man named Abdul Karim. His wife's name was Arbab. Together they had 9 children, 5 daughters and 4 sons. By any measure, this was a full, busy, demanding household. Abdul Karim had a sister named Shagufta. Shagufta was married to a man named Jan Muhammad, and together they had 1 son, a boy named Ghulam Muhammad. The family was connected, close, the kind that shows up for each other. Then Shagufta fell ill. And not long after, she was gone. Jan Muhammad was left alone with his young son Ghulam Muhammad and no idea how to manage. He worked outside the home during the day and had nobody to care for the child while he was gone. He did what felt like the only practical thing. He took his son to Abdul Karim's house and asked if Arbab could look after him. Arbab was home, she ran the household, and she had the capacity to add 1 more child to the mix. Abdul Karim and Arbab agreed without hesitation. Ghulam Muhammad grew up in that house. It became his real home, the place where he ate, slept, played, and was raised. Arbab was, for all practical purposes, the mother figure in his life. Years passed. Jan Muhammad eventually remarried, and with a new wife at home he decided it was time to bring his son back. Abdul Karim returned the boy without any objection. But the transition was not smooth. Ghulam Muhammad had spent his formative years in one home and was now expected to adjust to another. The new stepmother and he never really clicked. There were arguments. There was friction. The relationship between them was consistently difficult, and whenever Ghulam Muhammad complained to his father, Jan Muhammad sided with his wife. Ghulam Muhammad felt invisible in his own home. Unsupported. Dismissed. Eventually he started splitting his time, staying at his father's house for a week, then drifting back to Abdul Karim's house for a week, caught between 2 worlds, fully belonging to neither. This back and forth became the pattern of his entire childhood. And in that childhood, he grew close to one of Abdul Karim's daughters, a girl named Rida. She had been around him for as long as he could remember. When Ghulam Muhammad was old enough, he went to his father and told him plainly, he wanted to marry Rida. He had always liked her. She was the one he wanted. Jan Muhammad went to Abdul Karim and formally asked on his son's behalf. Abdul Karim's family had practically raised this boy. They knew him completely. There were no surprises, no unknowns. They said yes immediately. The wedding happened. Ghulam Muhammad and Rida were married. But the problems that had defined Ghulam Muhammad's life did not disappear with a wedding. His relationship with his stepmother remained tense. And now there was a new dimension. Rida, his wife, began having her own conflicts with the stepmother too. Whenever Ghulam Muhammad brought these complaints to his father, the answer was always the same. Jan Muhammad defended his wife. His son was always told he was in the wrong. The resentment inside Ghulam Muhammad deepened over the years. Eventually, exhausted by the dysfunction, he took Rida and moved out into a rented apartment. They had a daughter together. Life in the rented place was harder than he expected. Rent, bills, groceries, medical expenses, the numbers simply did not work. The financial pressure was relentless. He went to Arbab, the woman who had raised him, the closest thing to a real mother he had ever known, and sat with her quietly. He told her everything. The rented house was too much for him right now. He asked if he could stay with her family for 3 or 4 months while he sorted out his income. Just enough time to get stable. Then he would go back. Arbab said yes. Of course. Come and stay. Ghulam Muhammad moved in with Rida. 3 months passed. The arrangement was working well enough, until it wasn't. Abdul Karim's daughter Shazia, one of Rida's sisters, visited with her husband Muhammad Shafi one day. As soon as Shazia saw Ghulam Muhammad living there, she pulled her mother aside privately and made her feelings very clear. She told Arbab that decent people did not move into their in-laws' house like this. That he had already been given so much by this family, raised here as a child, given their daughter in marriage, and now living here again. She told her mother to ask him to leave. That this was not right. Arbab listened but said nothing to stop Shazia. She did not push back or defend Ghulam Muhammad. Those words found their way to him. When he heard what Shazia had said, something snapped. He went to Arbab and told her directly. As long as he was living there, Shazia was not to come to this house again. He did not want her here. Arbab's response was firm and immediate. She told him Shazia was her daughter. She had every right to come to her own mother's house whenever she chose. He had no authority to make that decision. This was her home, not his. He turned on his wife next. He told Rida that her relationship with her brother and sister-in-law was over. They had disrespected him and she was to have nothing to do with them. Rida told him he was being unreasonable. That families required compromise. That this was not worth the conflict he was creating. Things deteriorated from that point. Every time Shazia visited the house, Ghulam Muhammad would go silent and then explode afterward, fighting with Arbab about why she had been allowed in, making accusations, creating tension. Arbab had grown tired of it. And Ghulam Muhammad had grown increasingly fixated on the idea that nobody in this house respected him. On the morning of May 1st, Rida woke her husband and told him it was time to leave for work. He told her his head was hurting badly. He was not going in. He went back to sleep. Rida left for her Quran studies at the local religious school. She attended every day at 2 p.m. without fail. She kissed her daughter, said goodbye, and walked out. The house went quiet. At 2:30 in the afternoon, Ghulam Muhammad got up. He went to the kitchen. He picked up a knife. And he walked directly to the room where his younger sister-in-law Ikra was sleeping. Arbab was in the same room, also asleep. He did not hesitate. He attacked Ikra, stabbing her repeatedly. Arbab woke up screaming and tried to fight back, tried to protect her daughter, but he attacked her too, blow after blow, before turning and running from the house. Ikra died. Arbab, severely wounded and barely conscious, dragged herself, slowly, painfully, to the front door. She called out. Neighbors heard her and came running. They brought water, stabilized her as best they could, got a vehicle, and rushed her to the hospital. Doctors confirmed she would survive, though she needed time to recover. The family arrived at the hospital. After discussion, they went to Shah Latif police station in Karachi and filed a formal FIR naming Ghulam Muhammad as the accused killer. The complainant was Abdul Karim, the man who had raised him, fed him, sheltered him, given him his daughter, and opened his home to him again when he had nowhere else to go. Police registered the case. Ghulam Muhammad was not caught. At the time this story was reported, he was still at large. Police said raids were ongoing, but the accused had not been apprehended. Ikra had been sleeping. She had done nothing. She was not part of any argument, any accusation, any conflict. She was simply in the room. And the man her family had raised as one of their own walked in with a knife and made sure she never woke up. Lessons from the darkness. Abdul Karim's family gave Ghulam Muhammad everything a person could give: a childhood, a home, a mother's care, and eventually a wife from their own family. They asked for nothing in return. And when he came back struggling financially, they opened their door again without question. He repaid all of it with a knife. The first lesson is about the danger of misplaced entitlement. Ghulam Muhammad had received so much from this family that somewhere along the way he began to believe he had authority over them, the right to decide who could visit, who his wife could speak to, how the household should run. Gratitude had curdled into control. When people receive too much without ever being required to give back, some of them stop feeling grateful and start feeling owed. Watch for that shift in the people around you. The second lesson is about intervention. The conflict between Ghulam Muhammad and Arbab had been building for weeks, openly, loudly, repeatedly. He had told her directly that Shazia was not allowed in the house. He had told his wife to cut off her own family. These were not small warning signs. These were clear signals of a man whose anger was looking for a target. Nobody involved the police. Nobody removed him from the house. Nobody took the escalation seriously enough. The third lesson is the hardest one. When someone shows you that their anger has no boundaries, that they are willing to issue demands, make threats, and create conflict inside the very home that sheltered them, that is the moment to act. Not after. The door that was opened out of kindness needs to be closed before that kindness becomes the reason someone gets hurt. Ikra paid for other people's hesitation with her life.